please marry me. Billionaire single mom begs a janitor what he asked, in return, shocked. The ordinary rhythm of the parking lot broke the moment. Eleanor Hayes stepped out of her car. People first noticed the vehicle, sleek and unmistakably expensive. But it was her presence that made them stop. She didn't move like someone seeking attention. Yet every eye slowly turned toward her. There was no arrogance in her posture, only a quiet weight. The kind carried by people who have survived more than they celebrate. Eleanor Hayes was known in boardrooms as a billionaire single mother who had built an empire from ruins. But none of that mattered here. In this moment, she was simply a woman walking toward a man who held a mop instead of power. Daniel Carter stood near the cleaning cart, his hands wrapped around the wooden handle as if it grounded him. He had noticed her before, always passing through the store with calm purpose, sometimes with her young son walking beside her. She had never spoken to him, never acknowledged him beyond a polite nod. Today was different. She was walking straight toward him. His first thought was that he had done something wrong. His second was that this had to be a mistake. Around them, shoppers slowed. Conversations faded, and curiosity quietly gathered. Eleanor stopped in front of Daniel and stood there for a moment, as though steadying herself. Then, without warning, she lowered herself onto one knee. The sound of movement froze the space around them. Someone dropped a bag. Another raised a phone. Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. Before he could react, Eleanor opened a small ring box in her hands. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her voice was clear when she spoke. She said she knew how unbelievable it looked. She knew people would judge, laugh, misunderstand. But she also said she had spent her entire life doing what was expected of her. And for once, she wanted to do what felt true. She told him she hadn't fallen for his silence or his uniform, but for what she had seen when no one was watching. She had seen him help elderly customers without being asked, speak gently to children, and step aside so others could go first. She said her life had been filled with people who wanted something from her, and Daniel was the first person who never had. The crowd listened closely, hanging on to every word. Daniel could barely hear his own thoughts. His chest tightened, and the weight of every eye pressed down on him. He looked at the ring, then at her face. He searched for pity, for performance, for pride. He found none of it. What he saw instead was fear, the kind that comes from risking something real. Slowly, he asked her to stand up. A ripple of whispers passed through the crowd as she rose. Daniel's voice was calm but firm when he spoke. He asked her if she truly understood what she was asking. He told her he was not a symbol or a story. He was an ordinary man with no wealth, no influence, and a past that had taught him to be careful with trust. Eleanor answered immediately. She said she didn't want a man to complete her life, only someone to walk beside her. She said money had solved many problems, but never loneliness. Daniel listened carefully, then did something no one expected. He gently closed the ring box and placed it back into her hands. Gasps echoed around them. He said he was not saying no, but he couldn't say yes like this. Marriage to him was not a public performance or a moment of shock. It was a promise that deserved honesty, not applause. He told her he needed to know that she wasn't choosing him because he was different or safe or uncomplicated. He needed to know she could live without her wealth shaping every part of her identity. Not forever, but long enough to prove that what she felt wasn't curiosity or rebellion. The crowd grew quiet. Eleanor didn't interrupt or defend herself. She simply nodded, tears filling her eyes, and said she understood. Slowly, people began to drift away. Some were disappointed there was no dramatic ending. Others were moved by the restraint. Daniel returned to his work, though his hands shook and his thoughts raced. Eleanor walked back toward her car, not humiliated, but thoughtful. Before leaving, she turned and told him she would come back. Not as a billionaire asking for love, but as a woman willing to earn it. Daniel watched her go, feeling something unfamiliar stir inside him. For years, survival had been his only focus. Love had felt like a risk he couldn't afford. As he resumed sweeping the emptying parking lot, he realized life was asking him a different question now. Not whether he was worthy of love, but whether he was brave enough to face it. Eleanor did not return the next day, or the one after that. And Daniel told himself that was for the best. He buried the memory of the parking lot seen under routine, under the steady scrape of a mop against concrete and the predictable rhythm of shifts that began before sunrise and ended long after the crowds thinned. Yet every quiet moment pulled his thoughts back to her expression. Not when she knelt, but when she accepted his condition without argument. He had expected resistance, pride, or disbelief. What he saw instead was resolve, and that unsettled him more than the proposal itself. When she finally returned, there was nothing remarkable about her arrival. No black sedan gliding into place, no subtle ripple of attention. She came on foot, wearing plain clothes that blended easily into the flow of shoppers. Daniel noticed her only because she waited. She stood near the edge of the lot, hands folded, patient in a way that suggested she understood she was entering his world now, not inviting him into hers. He finished his shift before approaching her, unsure of what he would say, unsure of what she would ask. They spoke without ceremony. Eleanor told him she had stepped away from her company, not as a performance, but as a necessity. For the first time in decades, she said, her schedule was not controlled by boards, deadlines, or negotiations. She had rented a small apartment nearby, unfamiliar and quiet, and was learning what it meant to exist without constant authority. Daniel listened without interruption, measuring her words not by their promise, but by their humility. He did not congratulate her. He simply asked if she was certain. She said certainty had never been part of any decision that mattered. Over the following weeks, Daniel allowed her into the rhythm of his life. There were no grand gestures or sudden declarations. He took her to the places that had shaped him, not to impress, but to be understood. She met people who had watched him grow up, who remembered his mistakes and his endurance. Eleanor was not treated as someone special, and she did not ask to be. She listened more than she spoke, learned names, remembered stories. When conversations turned blunt or uncomfortable, she did not retreat. She stayed. Daniel watched closely. He noticed how she handled inconvenience, how she reacted when no one deferred to her opinion. He saw her frustration, when problems could not be solved instantly, and her quiet satisfaction, when small efforts mattered. One afternoon, she admitted how strange it felt to be unseen. Daniel told her that invisibility could be a gift if one learned how to listen within it. That night, she confessed that for the first time in her life, silence did not feel empty. The past surfaced slowly. Daniel spoke about his failed marriage, about trusting someone who loved the security he provided, but not the man himself. He talked about the way betrayal reshaped him, how it taught him to expect departure before connection. Eleanor did not respond with reassurance or promises. She shared her own losses, the cost of ambition, the loneliness that came from being needed rather than known. Their conversations were not meant to fix anything. They were meant to reveal it. The moment of truth arrived without warning. Eleanor received news that threatened everything she had built. A critical decision needed her authority, and delay would cost livelihoods. She did not hide this from Daniel. She told him plainly what was at stake. He listened, then told her to go. There was no resentment in his voice, only clarity. "Love," he said, should not require abandoning responsibility. If she stayed and resented him later, it would poison whatever they were building. Eleanor left that night, carrying the weight of choice. She resolved the crisis swiftly, with precision earned from years of leadership. But when it was done, she made a decision that shocked her peers. She stepped away completely, transferring control and refusing return. For the first time, her departure was not a strategy, but a conclusion. She returned not as someone escaping pressure, but as someone finished with it. When she found Daniel again, there was no audience. No ring, no expectations. She told him she had chosen him not because he was safe or simple, but because he was honest in a world that rewarded illusion. Daniel took time before answering. He told her that love, to him, was not proven by sacrifice alone, but by consistency. She nodded, understanding that commitment was not a moment but a practice. They did not rush into promises. What they built grew quietly, shaped by respect rather than spectacle. Those who later heard their story spoke less about wealth or status, and more about courage. Not the courage to propose in public, but the courage to step away from identity, expectation, and fear. And in that quiet truth, they found something neither had known before: a life chosen, not inherited.